Hello everyone, welcome back. This week we are talking about the consumer interview, how to do the consumer interview and the procedure and the techniques and the methods. And today we are going to focus on the how to do the in-depth interview because I want you to do the in-depth interview, a very personal and very deep kind of interview, conversational interview with your consumer or with yourself, okay? So for today's class, I'd like to talk about what is in-depth interview as a major qualitative study design. So I'm gonna explain what it is along with some major qualitative study design. And secondly, I'm gonna talk about the techniques, the interview techniques, in-depth interview techniques, along with some example cases. And I'd like to talk to you about some probing question, how to ask the probing question, okay, as well as the following up question. That was what we were talking about in the last class. All right, so we're going to continue to talk about your role as an interviewer because you are taking your role to direct the interview. So you're not directing the interview offensively, but if you're gonna just listening to what you're saying, and it'll take forever. Okay, so we have very limited time for the interview, so that is why I want you to direct your interview in somehow to get more like fruitful and more effective kind of findings that you can get from your in-depth interview. All right. Okay, before we talk about the in-depth interview, let me introduce four major qualitative study design. Okay, so we have observation, and we have document review, and we have in-depth interview, and we have focus group interview if you are investigating the groups with the people. Okay, so that is the focus group interview is not for the case of our study, okay, consumer profiling. So we have done some of the observation, we have done some document reviews before you come up with your interview questions, and then you're gonna follow up with your interview ideas and an in-depth interview. You're gonna go ahead and conduct an in-depth interview. Let's take a look at this one by one. All right, the observation, the purpose of observation is learning about their behaviors and the interactions in natural setting. Okay, so we have done the accompanied shopping, and we are spend time with them, with your consumer or yourself, to look into and to look closely about how you're behaving when you're making your choices, clothing choices. Okay, so this is the study. This is for studying like cultural aspects of particular context. Okay, so in case of you have seen the case of Golf Ninja, and they can explain about what is happening and what is going on in the field, the specific field of that community, and that is based on your observation. Okay, so you're gonna observe what is happening and the process of your consumer and the context that or the environment or the situation your consumer is involved in, and then you are done the accompanied shopping as well for the observation part, and we have observed their wardrobe as well. Okay, so and then we're gonna go ahead and to do some research. Okay, to do some study. We're gonna do some document review to search for some the articles or the academic articles or the newspaper article which is reporting about their specific behavior, or you can look into their social media and their Instagram and their photo album as well. Photo album, like digital, a kind of photo album like on their social media, because that is talking pretty much about the images that they have placed, and they also have textual kind of message coming along with that image, and you're gonna get the sense. Okay, and because why we're doing document review is to identify the patterns of communication. Okay, so that is the image-based communication, or it could be the communicating what they are expressing, what is in their mind, and that could be also witnessed on the by the photo album, wardrobe study, and the social media content, and those kind of documents. All the documents are talking about your consumers behavior. Okay, and then the third and the most important and the most major important kind of techniques and design, a study design of qualitative approach is in-depth interview. In-depth interview is to explore individual experiences and the perception in rich detail. So you're gonna listen to what they say. Okay, so you're gonna get the textual kind of information from them, what they are describing about their behavior. Okay, and then if you are interested in what others are talking about them in their specific group, and you're gonna it is not for this project, but if you are interested in the future or for the next semester, you can go ahead and do some focus group to broaden your idea. Okay. Alright, so we have seen the example case of Golf Ninja on the week 2 and the costume play last week, and those two articles took 4 of these major study designs for all of these 4 designs at the same time. Okay, so if you're taking all these approaches to explain to like take a look at the behavior this way and that way, you can look at the images and you can listen to what they're saying, and those kind of collaborative kind of data collection from all different approaches that might really help. Okay, so what is in-depth interview? There are many definitions of in-depth interview, but I like this phrase by Loveland, the American sociologist who is very well known for his peace movement studies. And this phrase has been presented by Mr. and Mrs. Loveland, John and Lynn Loveland, and they have talked about the in-depth interview as a guided conversation. That is conversational kind of interview, but a little bit guided by the interviewer, by you. All right. Okay. So I think this phrase is characterizing the essence of what the in-depth interview is. This image here, you can see the image of the path in the forest, and you can see the little path. And I think this image helps us to understand that in an in-depth interview, we may not always know the path, which path your consumer will take. Okay, so that is in fact that's the strength of this method as well. But at the same time, as an interviewer, we need to keep the same path along with your interview design and your purpose of the study. Okay, so it is a kind of like guided kind of conversation with you and your consumer, your respondent, or yourself. So if you're reflecting your experiences and what you're thinking about that phenomenon and yourself and your behavior, which is influenced by the social context, cultural context. In that case, that is too broad, and you'd like to stop on every trees, just like on this illustrated on this picture. So we are walking along with our consumer or yourself to listen to what they're talking about, this tree, talking about that tree, but you're gonna manage the time. So if you're thinking, that is enough, and let's move on to talk about this issue and this clothing, that why you hesitated to make a purchase on that specific situation, and those kind of a question, like interesting kind of question to make them to take their path to come along with you. So that is the definition of in-depth interview. So you're gonna be like open-minded to take along with them, but you're a little bit structured, a little bit in your own purpose, intention of your study. You're gonna take your way. Okay, so that is something in between. But is if you're asking that, is that structured kind of question or unstructured question? Then means you are having certain questions in your mind, but you're not taking the one by one kind of the flows of the questions that you have come up with. So I have suggested you to make a 2 or 3 up to 5 kind of interview questions in mind, but you're not gonna bring your paper to read and ask about your question because you're interviewing your friend or yourself. So your question will be in your mind, but you're gonna listen to what they're saying, and between while you're doing conversation, like discussion about their consumption behavior, and you're gonna come this way and that way to think about your questions, and if you are getting enough information from him or her. Okay, so that is in-depth interview. Okay, so now let me talk to you about the in-depth interview, guys. Okay, so this is what I want you to think about before you go for the interview or while you're doing your interview. Okay. And a lot of students are asking, how long do I have to conduct this interview, proceed in this interview for how long? So the answer is it depends. Okay, so you're interviewee and you will decide to stop the conversation on certain like points, and in case you become like silent and nothing to ask about and nothing to talk about, in that case you're gonna stop your interview, and that's absolutely okay. And if your interviewee is being talkative and being immersed and being very casual and comfortable to talk about it more and more and over again, and it takes more than 30 minutes, that's perfect. Okay, so it depends, and you're gonna decide where to start, and you're gonna like pay attention if your interviewee is getting bored and they're being tired. In that case, you're gonna stop the interview. Okay, so I'm thinking of about less than more than 30 minutes. That could be perfect, but if it is shorter, that is okay as well. Okay, so if you are doing interview to yourself, in case you are doing a self-reflection interview with yourself, in that case I strongly recommend you to record your voices and then transcribe. Okay, so if you're just writing down what you think, that is quite different. Okay, so what you write and what you say is quite different. Okay, because when you are writing your thinking and your opinion, in that case you're taking much time to think over and erase some part, and then you're gonna write it again, and in that case that is not a conversation based kind of interview based findings. So I really want you to experience and to practice the in-depth interview with yourself. So I really want you to ask yourself, it sounds like a crazy, but you ask yourself with your main questions and your main interview questions, and you're gonna record your voices like, oh, while I was shopping, and I think I was not quite satisfied at that part. Let me reflect that my shopping sites on that, and those kind of your self-reflecting interview. You are taking the role of your interviewer and your interviewee. Okay, so you're gonna start doing conversation with yourself. Okay, so so that might work. Okay. It's far better than just writing down what you think. So very conversational, kind of like your languages, and you cannot even recognize that you are speaking like that and you are thinking and you're saying like that. And you can have a very interesting and findings from your reflection of your experiences. Very rich and fruitful findings could be achieved by interviewing yourself. Okay? All right. So promise. Okay, you're not gonna submit the recorded file, but what you're going to submit is the transcription of your interview. But I really strongly recommend, I beg you, please record what you think in your own words by your voice, and then transcribe what you have thought about those the questions, your responses, and questions and your responses. Okay, all right. Okay, so before you start your in-depth interview, you're gonna prepare your audio recording device, your phone, okay? And then you're gonna ask your interviewee's permission. I believe that most of you have got your interviewee's permission already, and please make sure that their information is will be protected as 100% confidential, and you're not gonna submit the audio file to me. You're gonna just submit the transcript of your interview. All right, okay? And I cannot use your interview the data for my personal purpose, like personal use. I'll be arrested. Okay, so you're gonna make sure that your interviewee will feel comfortable, that their privacy will be protected, and you're not gonna use her or his or her real name, so nobody can know that you are interviewing him or her, because we are gonna talk about a very personal or private kind of information when we are doing like fashion consumers, doing the interview with fashion consumers. Okay. All right, so you're gonna make them feel comfortable, and then you're gonna explain the intent of your study, what you're studying about. Be honest and be trustful to explain more about what you want to study about, and then you're gonna ask your question with your first question. Okay, so make them feel comfortable, and you're gonna take a very you will diverge to pursue an emergent idea in detail. Diverge means you can move away. You can move this way and that way. If your interviewee is leading their path to explain about their feelings and talking about their experiences, and then you're gonna change the direction, and you can erase and drop your question that was previously prepared in your mind, and you can move away in that case. Okay, so you can change your topic at any time, and you can also change the sequence of the questions. So if you are thinking the next coming up question is not relevant anymore, in that case you're gonna just erase that question, and you're gonna come up with other questions, and you're gonna move this way and that way to ask in a broader kind of perspectives to understand better about your consumers. So the key is flexibility. Okay, so flexibility is the key of the interviewer. Okay, so you're taking your role as interviewer to guide this conversation, and then you're gonna take your lead, but you're gonna move through the questions, and you're gonna let your interviewee to become more immersed, to become more talkative. So you're gonna observe and see, be attentive to look at their body languages when they start to use their body language. That means they are becoming immersed. In that case, you're gonna ask more and more questions. Why? Tell me more. Tell me more. Okay, so that is the point, that your participant, your respondents will be motivated to talk more and deeper about their perceptions or the attitudes about certain product or the services, any stimuli around their environment. Okay, all right. And it is very important. Give your respondent enough time to pause and to think about. Okay, so tell me, okay, and those kind of your actions, like, so what, why do you think like that? Tell me, answer. And you cannot make them to talk like in the way of your thinking. Okay, so you're gonna make them to think. I strongly believe that 8 seconds rule. If you're waiting for 8 seconds, they start to talk. That is a miracle. So you have to like bear those kind of the periods of the silence. Okay, so you're gonna wait. Okay, take your time, and those kind of conversation and your respect and the protection of your interviewees is quite appreciated. All right. Okay, so let's start doing the interview. So let me briefly talk about the interviewing techniques. So how to ask questions and how to listen to their responses. All right. So in-depth interview is not just about asking questions and listening to their responses. That is not enough. All right. So what you're going to do is a systematic recording and documenting what they have talked about. And in case you don't fully understand, or if you're thinking that their answers are not enough to understand better about their attitude, motivation, and behavior, in that case, you're gonna follow up with better questions. So we're calling those questions as probing questions. Probing is asking follow-up questions when you're not fully understood. You cannot fully understand the response in case the answers are too vague or too ambiguous, or you want to obtain more specific ideas and the specific information from this interview question, then you're gonna come up with your probing question. Let's see this example. Okay, your question, tell me about this model, this specific model. If you are in case you're interviewing in natural setting like at home, and you're interviewing this sneakerhead who loves to collect all the sneakers, and you're gonna ask this question, tell me about this specific model, Sacai and Nike Swaffle. Yeah, in that case, your respondent might say it's cool, period. And in that case, you certainly need the probing question to ask more. Okay, so what you're going to ask? What you're going to ask more? Okay. Okay, so this is one example. A couple of years ago, your senior took my class and did this in-depth interview, and that was really good kind of example of probing questions. So I brought it here, okay, to share with you. So what do you like the most about these shoes? And the answer was, it's cool. Okay, and then you're gonna come up with your probing question. What was one thing about Jordan shoes that stood out as cool? That is asking, what do you mean by cool? Okay, and the answer was, it's a classic, but it's different at the same time. And then you're gonna ask about how it is so different, how it is different. What do you mean by a different? So you mentioned that this is a classic and a different, and what do you mean by that? Could you tell me more about that? And then you're gonna come up with those answers, like very detailed and rich kind of description about this specific product. Okay, that you can witness their consumption values as well as what they care the most about this collection. And the answer was, it's amazing to see that all the variety of color prints this season. I got the latest Air Jordan 29 colorway that I got recently. The vivid print on high-tech material is just amazing. I'm so lucky to have it. I'm so lucky to have it. And then what you're going to ask for the next. And these are the series of the questions, asking probing questions to ask again follow-up questions like, tell me more about that, did I understand it correctly, and those kind of questions. Please take a look at those. Okay, so the asking questions and asking probing question is very important because you can get a different kind of answers or the different kind of values and the attitudes that your respondents might have, like such as, for example, it was cool and rewarded as it is like different, and it has been rewarded as is hard to get. So you can get various meanings that the respondent put on his sneaker, all right? And asking relevant questions and asking enough probing question is important, but if you are asking over and over and over again, and they might be irritated, so you're gonna observe if they are tired, and if you don't want to talk more about that, and you're gonna stop and move on for the next question. Okay. And it is I strongly recommend for you to take notes while doing your interview with your interviewee. That means it's good to remember what you have asked and what you have heard from her, because the in-depth interview is quite a long kind of interview. I have recommended like around 30 minutes, and that's really long, so it is hard to remember what you have heard already. And you can organize and make documents, or you can arrange the sequence of your questions by taking notes what you have achieved, what kind of responses you get, and you're not gonna forget. And your respondents might get those kind of impressions that you're paying attention and you're listening and you're being interested, and that way they could be encouraged to talk more about their experiences and their thinking. Okay, so it is recommended to take notes while even though you're recording your questions and answers, but it is good to take notes while you are taking this interview. Okay, so another point is, please be respectful of boundaries. Okay, so they could come up with very sensitive issues like your body image or their self-esteem, self-concept, and those kind of their experiences and their perceptions about their self and their social influences. If they're talking about their relationship with others, then in that case you might take your lead to force your interviewee to talk what they really don't want to talk. Okay, so you're gonna be sensitive and to be respectful, to listen to ask questions that they want to talk about, and in case they don't like to talk about pretty much, in that case you're gonna stop there and you're gonna go on move on for the next question. Okay, and the too exaggerated kind of emotional empathy, like if you're just like, wow, or nice, great, and those kind of emotional empathy could work for some cases, but if you I want you to be very sensitive and to make your purpose of this interview is to listen to their deep, rich kind of stories about your interviewees. So it is important to encourage them to talk more and to be involved in this conversational interview. All right. Okay, so the last and the most important, I think, part of this in-depth interview technique is be careful with your leading questions. Leading questions means you are gonna make your assumptions before asking questions. So they answered like it's cool, period. And then you're gonna ask again, what do you mean by cool? Then they're gonna be like feel like uncomfortable. Do I have to explain more? So what do you want? Do you want the word different? Do you want the word classic? Do you want the word hard to get? And that is kind of leading question if you are asking your interviewee to answer in the way that you are thinking. Okay, so if you're making assumptions to force your interviewee to say something, and that is kind of leading kind of questions. So I have asked you to find the barriers or the difficulties and dissatisfactory moments while they are doing their fashion shopping, and please come up with your answer, your solution to make them feel more happy. Okay, so that was kind of like leading kind of my hope that I wanted to do this interview and get your answer and give some suggestions for your consumer. But in case your consumer is 100% sure about their decision making, and if you can find enough like insights from this consumer interview that is fruitful enough, that is absolutely fine. So in case you cannot come up with your answers to like with your conclusion and you cannot find your answers as a designer or a consultant or the entrepreneur, and then that is absolutely fine. You cannot just manage this interview to come up with certain answers. So that is kind of leading kind of top down kind of approach. So I don't want you to take that kind of offensive role to do this interview. So if you are thinking, for example, if you are thinking of that question, so did that experience make you feel happy? That is very pretty much leading question, because you are forcing them to feel so you felt happiness right that point of time. So tell me about that. And that is kind of leading a question. So you're gonna moderate and change your questions like more in a broader way, like how did your experience make you feel? And they're gonna answer in their own languages. Okay, so own vocabulary. So if you're asking too much questions, like too much why questions, in that case I want you to replace those why question with the what or how kind of questions to make your respondents to answer easier and more feel like more comfortable while doing this in-depth interview. All right. Okay, so for today, I have talked a little bit about the in-depth interview techniques and what I want you to keep in mind while doing your interview. Okay, so if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk to me about your the project, and you're always welcome to come to the Zoom meeting and talk to me. All right, so we can discuss about your project and we can talk more about this interview. All right. right? And next week we are going to talk about the psychological experiment and experimental interview, and that is optional. That is the in-depth interview is pretty much what you're going to do, and the experimental interview is kind of leading kind of interview techniques that in that case they cannot like express their thoughts or the opinions. In case you can have a possible way to lead the questions, okay, to lead the question with some kind of stimulus information, okay. So for the next week, that is the optional kind of way to ask questions, but I'm gonna briefly introduce about the psychological experiments and experimental interview that might help to ask your interviewee to think in a different way. And you're gonna suggest an option and all different kind of options to think in a different way. Okay, so I'm gonna see you next week. Thank you so much for your attention. See you next week. Thank you.